This conference will now be recorded.
Is the primary foundation of my work with my clients. And I also teach them other resources that helped me as I moved through my journey. And I will hopefully share a little bit more about that as we continue our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Again, we truly appreciate Michelle, Nancy, and Nancy being here to discuss our mental health and how we can take care of that, specifically during our journey and our struggles and our triumphs as we all learn to navigate and live through our current pandemic. So I will turn it over to Sheila and we will get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sheila Evans, and I'm a graduate of Project Engage, which is a program taught by the Council on Aging at the Seymour Center and the Passmore Center, senior centers, that teaches seniors in the community to be leaders in the community. So this group that designed this program was our mental wellness senior resource team. So I'll be asking the questions. The first question is for Michelle. And Michelle, in defining isolation and loneliness, can you explain how these two can be correlated, but also these two are not always mutually exclusive?
Yes, thank you. So when you think of isolation, you really think of purposefully separating yourself from others or from something. So isolation could be for a positive reason. You can isolate yourself to become more self-centered, to become more self-aware, to become more mindful. You can isolate yourself because sometimes it takes isolation to grow. Sometimes you might isolate yourself for negative reasons. So you might isolate yourself because you're upset with people, because you don't want to be bothered. It can really be a form of self-punishment if you're isolating yourself for those reasons. However, when you think about loneliness, that's more of a feeling. So you can be in a room full of people and feel lonely. You could be in a crowd full of people and feel misunderstood and feel by yourself. So when you think about loneliness and isolation and COVID-19, they may intersect or they may not. So you can isolate yourself because you need to for medical reasons, and you could also feel lonely because you don't feel understood or you don't have that in-person support. But it could also be separate because you may isolate yourself because you need some time to think, some time to kind of regroup because of COVID-19 to create sort of a new normal because of COVID-19. And again, loneliness can occur because we have to do things in a different way. COVID-19 has made us have to adjust. Like we have to figure out our new normal, so to speak. Our daily routine may look different. We may be in a house full of people, but we're not around our coworkers, so we may still feel lonely. So again, when you think about isolation and you think about loneliness, they're really two separate terms, but there is some intersectionality that we need to consider when we're thinking about COVID-19. Also with isolation and loneliness, it's okay to change your routine. It's okay to have to adjust. It's okay to have to rest. It's okay to not be creative during this time. It doesn't mean that you're just going to be this genius and come up with all these brilliant business ideas. That's not what this means. So isolation sometimes is needed, but it can be sometimes harmful. And loneliness can also be, loneliness doesn't have to mean that you're by yourself. It can mean that you're in a room full of people, but you just misunderstood.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is also for Michelle, and it's how can the disruption in our routines contribute to isolation and loneliness? For example, I wake up in the morning and I have to figure out what day it is. What am I doing? What was I doing before? And what am I doing now? I had a routine and now I can't follow it anymore.
Right, so it still goes back to adjusting to change. So not really, like you have to understand that when something changes in your life, you can't expect to function the same way. When changes happen, you have to adapt as well. So if you don't have the same routine in place, like implement some anchoring techniques, implement some grounding techniques, meaning that you have a constant in place. So maybe I get up at 10 o'clock every day. Maybe I practice some type of self-care at 12 o'clock, like a breathing exercise, a walk in the park, some type of sensory engagement. So just because it looks different, people sometimes get afraid of it looking differently, but that doesn't mean that your function has to suffer because it looks differently. So really, if your routine changes, be kind to yourself in the sense that you can be creative and create a new schedule for yourself that's fluid and not rigid. So we think about adjusting to COVID-19 and the changes and some of those emotional adjustments that we have to make. Connectivity is also important. So making sure you stay connected with loved ones, those in which give you some positive energy. So we have technology. We can do FaceTime. You can call loved ones. You can do social distancing and see your loved ones, but make sure you do more of that. So when you have to adjust to a change such as this, something that we've never seen before, like literally in my lifetime, and had to adjust to, you need to make sure you utilize more self-care skills. So that can look like literally, if you were engaging in self-care once a day, you may want to do that 3 times a day. Some breathing exercises, some journaling, some reflection. Specifically in my practice, we use the APR process, which is awareness, process, and reflection. So that means you're aware of what you feel. You have a process in which to address those feelings. And sometimes that can mean just being with your feelings. And then you do some reflective work. So you have the capacity to deal with stressors that come about as a result of COVID-19.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Nancy Ruffner. How can I connect to my community and to resources to help combat isolation and/or loneliness?
Yes, thank you. Well, it's a good time right now to simply keep our eyes open for opportunities. And everybody that's here today has done that. We're connected here today. We're pursuing this topic and being here among us. Thanks for everybody being here. There's a lot of outreach going on. And an example is Orange County Department of Aging's terrific newsletter, or the full page ad that I saw in the News and Observer that explained all of the different programs that are going on. Maybe online is not your thing. There's other things you can do. Perhaps your faith community has something going on. Look into that. All the faith communities that I have called have either had someone answering the phone or they've returned my call promptly. So if you're a member of a faith community, that's an option. We can still volunteer. Volunteering is still occurring. It's just being done differently. And it's interesting to find out how. For instance, the food pantries, food bank, interfaith food shuttle, they now have folks that drive up to get the food, or the volunteer drivers are just simply taking the food and the groceries to a distribution destination. There's a program in Orange County called the Porch Program, and you can leave groceries on your porch and somebody will come and get the groceries. So you can participate that way, or you can drive. There's a number of hotlines available. The Baptist Aging Ministry, BAM, has a toll-free hotline on guide 866-578-4673. That's a faith-based community. But there's also neighboring. When COVID started, I began to neighbor with my neighbors, and we would meet every day at 5:30 or text each other and just sort of check in. And so there's a number of things that we can do. I take a walk every morning, and there's a fellow on his front porch, and I notice a wheelchair beside him, and he hollers, "Hey!" And I hear him right through my earbuds. And so I holler back, "Hey!" And then the next day I said, "I'm Nancy." And he said, "I'm Dave." And now I have to think of something to tell him tomorrow morning. We've got a connection, and we've got a volley going on.
That's great. Thank you. Our next topic is managing anxiety, fear, and grief. And the first question is for Nancy Loeffler, and that is, I feel a loss of so much: friends, attending events, dinner parties. How do these factors contribute to fear, anxiety, and grief?
Thank you. Grief is the normal response to any loss. And when I would talk about grief before the current situation, people would think that grief is just the death of a loved one. And now we're beginning to realize that just what that means. We've lost so much. We've lost, in our new normal, we've lost the ability to be able to have coffee with a friend. We can do it a little easier now, but at the beginning, we lost a lot of our connections, and we didn't, it happened like that. We needed the time, as Michelle said, to adjust to that new normal, but it keeps changing. And these are uncertain times.
Good, thank you. Does anyone else on the panel have anything to add to that question? All right, the next question is also for Nancy Loeffler, and the question is, how does a loss of control contribute to grief?
A loss of control, yeah. We don't know what to do when we lose control. We don't like to be out of control. And we want to be able to control everything. But we're never in control. We just think we are. And so when we're feeling powerless and when we're feeling helpless, those feelings of control tend to spiral and take us deeper into that feeling of the kind of isolation that keeps us away from people. So what can we control? We can look at the things in our life that are in our control. Like we can control what food we eat, or we can control what kind of self-care we do, or we can control when to watch the news or what news to watch. And so taking a look at the things that we can and can't control, and that may change if we find ourselves in a situation or a conversation with someone that's bringing up a lot of fear or anxiety. We can control not having that conversation or changing our daily routine in order to feel a little bit more in control of the things that we can control.
Great. The next question is for Michelle. I seem to be short-tempered with everyone, even my dog. Why and what can I do to change this?
Usually people experience some type of emotional response that they're not used to because they just lack the capacity to deal with things in which seem to be normal because we've had to make so many adjustments. So in order to do that, you increase your capacity to deal with these things that give you this emotional reaction. So you increase your capacity with self-care. You increase your capacity, as Nancy said, by controlling your routine, like having these things in place in which you can control, like your routine, self-care. You have these things in which you can engage in, like connectivity. We don't realize how much human connectivity means to us. Like just the conversation, just being able to talk to somebody about what you feel, maybe not even about what you feel, just having a conversation, getting out of the house. So just a change of scenery. So like stepping outside, feeling the fresh air. So if you don't have the capacity to deal with things in which would normally be easy to manage, and you need to increase your capacity, and you do so by increasing your self-care. You do so by increasing that human connectivity. You do so by processing and being with yourself and understanding exactly what you're feeling. You practice mindfulness, be kind to yourself, understand that it's okay to get more rest. Going back to the cycle of grief, when you experience grief, you first have denial. So literally we had COVID-19 and we were like, oh my God, we can't believe that this is really occurring. Like we have to be quarantined in the house. Like who can believe that? And then you have anger. That's your second sort of stage of grief. So you get upset. Like we don't want to be in the house. We can be rebellious a bit. Who wants to stay in the house all the time? And then you have some bargaining. So you're kind of accepting it. You're like, well, this is my new normal, but really I want to go back to the way things were, but I can't. So you almost feel a little bit stuck in that situation. Eventually you get to the acceptance stage of grief. So you really understand that this is what I have to adjust to. Your emotions have calmed themselves. You created some emotional distance from the new situation in which you're in, and then you have more capacity. Again, you have to have capacity to deal with changes. And in order to have capacity, you have to call it out, be able to identify what stage you're in, what your needs are, fulfill those needs, and then you have capacity, and then you'll see your emotions start to normalize again.
Great, thank you. The next question is, I'm going to ask to all three of you. So I'll tell you the question, and the question is, are the fears I'm having about COVID normal? Are the fears normal? And I'll ask Nancy Ruffner first to answer that question.
Yes, the fears are normal. Speaking as a professional and also a citizen, I think that fear of the unknown is a normal reaction. We don't have any point of comparison right now. We're inside a pandemic and we feel off kilter. But what I've found is, and others are saying here, if we talk about it like we're doing now, some of that fear loses some of its power. It will lose its hold on me if I talk about it. So let's keep talking.
Right. And I'll ask the same question to Michelle. Are the fears I'm having about COVID normal?
Yes, they're very normal. So it's normal to see something that you can't control, to have to experience it, to have to adjust your daily routine, to not know when a vaccine is going to come about, to not know if you can see family members, to have to change the way in which you just proceed day to day in the grocery store, or just human contact. Yes, it is very normal to have some fear associated with changes that we've had to make. But just like with any traumatic situation, because this can be a traumatic situation, or you can have a traumatic response to this COVID-19 situation, you have to call it out. As Nancy Ruffner said, you have to label it. You have to have conversations about it. Take the power away from it. Like, we have to manage this. We have to be healthy. We have to work together. We do have sort of a common threat, so that commonality can bring us together to have these conversations about COVID-19 and what we need to do differently. So yes, the fear is normal. However, you don't have to operate in fear because you're not operating alone.
Thank you. And again, I'll ask Nancy Loeffler the same question. Are the fears I'm having about COVID normal?
Yes, absolutely. The fears we're experiencing are about basic needs: safety, health, the health of our economic state. Will I lose my business? Will I lose my job? Will someone I know get COVID, or will I get COVID? So yes, they're very normal. And by talking about them, it helps to take the elephant out of the room, and it helps to let others see that we're all having that same feeling, and to help to dissolve it just a little bit. So yes, they're normal. And I think it helps too to give everyone permission to know that these feelings are normal.
Great, thank you. The next question I'm going to ask to both Nancy Ruffner and to Michelle. The question is, should I use telemedicine options as a resource for mental health support? And I'll ask Michelle that question first.
Yes, most definitely. You should definitely use telehealth as a resource. It's very easy for anybody to access. You can access telehealth from your phone. They send you a link and you talk to somebody. And people may think, okay, well, we're not in person. It's not as personable. We don't have that connectivity, but you do. Like, I see all my clientele right now through telehealth, and we're able to connect. I can see you, like I can see those nonverbal cues. I can give you feedback. You can take notes during the telehealth session. So you still have that human connectivity that we keep referring to on this panel. You may think that is missing when you're doing things through a computer or through a phone, but it's not. You still can pick up on people's energy, laughter, positive energy. You can read things to one another. So that interaction is what we're talking about. You need that interaction to survive. There have been several studies done, like throughout our history. If you do not have that human interaction, you are not healthy. Like, literally, it can make you physically sick. So just because it's in a different platform, do not shun it. Try it. And believe me, it does work.
Okay. And I'll ask that same question to Nancy Ruffner. Should I use telemedicine options as a resource for mental health support?
Yes, absolutely we should. I think we're doing a pretty good job of getting the word out that you can connect with your mental health providers. And we're also getting the word out about how to participate or plan and prepare for a telehealth appointment, or whether or not your insurance will cover it and how to find that out. I've done a lot of reading about the research and the surveys coming back from consumer comfort about this, and most people seem pretty comfortable with it. The older consumers who are already experiencing a challenge with isolation and loneliness find that it's invaluable, because for right now, this is the connection that they have to the outside world. And they can't go to the senior center, can't go to church right now, and this connection becomes more valuable.
Thank you. Our third topic is identifying fatigue and finding motivation. The first question is for Michelle, and the question is, I know there are many items and projects I should be doing. How do I get myself to the place that I am feeling productive once again?
Right, that's a great question. So you have to, again, I hate to keep saying this, but capacity. So if you are in the stage of grief and you are angry, or you're feeling some denial about everything that you've had to adjust to because of COVID-19, this may not be the time for you to have creative energy. It just may not. And you have to be okay with that and be kind to yourself and know that that's okay. Just because you have to be sort of quarantined and in your home more often than normal doesn't mean that you need to become a genius or somehow like explore some type of new business venture. Like, it doesn't work that way. So again, therapy through teletherapy, I'm kind of tying it back to the question before. If you're able to get that guidance and that structure, you can identify where you are in your grieving process or your change process to figure out if you actually have the capacity to do some of those things. And if you don't, you can be kind to yourself, get more rest, indulge in more of that self-care that we talked about before to increase capacity. And you will eventually get to the point in which you're really motivated to do more, to have some of that creative energy. But you have to kind of build, you have to recognize it for what it is and build your foundation and continue to become more motivated throughout the process. Everything is a process. You cannot skip it, no matter how much you want to skip it. You have to go through the process in order to experience growth.
Thank you. Do either of the other panelists have anything on this particular topic to add? Okay, I'll go to my next. Oh, I'm sorry.
I did. I just wanted to say,
yes.
along with everything else, you know, I've noticed a stamina issue myself, and I make it a point to get rest. In fact, I will set myself up for rest. A friend told me last week that she tries to take a leisurely bath right before she retires for the night. So I'll try that. One of the best things about a stay-at-home order, this might be COVID's silver lining, is that we have time. We have time to take time, and that's okay today.
That's great. Thank you. My next question is for Nancy Ruffner. I feel as I have gotten older that it takes me longer to accomplish my tasks. In this environment, it seems to take me even longer. Nancy.
Yes. Yeah, there's an undercurrent, definite undercurrent, emotional energy. Your body is fighting, and we're vigilant, we're on alert, and whether we're aware of it or not, that's our state of being. So we have a lot more to think about. There are a lot more considerations. We're playing the tape all the way out. There's more steps to everything. We're not only in this for ourselves, but we may be protecting other people. I may have to think about the protection of a loved one, my children, my sister, and that's a lot of complex thinking. You're using a lot of energy, and the result is fatigue. And I'll say it again, that's okay today.
Yeah, great, thank you. Michelle, this question is for you. I feel anxious and jumpy, and I'm not sure why.
Right. So again, it goes back to energy. It goes back to also brain functioning. So serotonin and dopamine, they control your mood and kind of like your pleasure seeking place in your brain. So when you experience a lot of changes, a lot of shifts, things that seem out of your control, it can literally create an imbalance of those chemicals in your brain. It can drain some of your energy, which could create more anxiety. So you address that by grounding yourself. They have great meditation apps that you can use. You can talk to your church family, as we mentioned before. But again, you want to make sure that you're creating capacity. And I will say this, do not be afraid of taking medication temporarily. So if you need to take some type of anti-anxiety medication or antidepressant something to help you temporarily through this time, there's nothing wrong with that. Just like we have other medical issues like hypertension and other things that we have to address through medication, the same thing goes for your mental health. So you may feel anxious and jumpy, and it may be out of your control. So keep that in mind. It may not be anything that you're doing, but again, your body's just not used to it. Your basic needs are being threatened right now. And again, those chemicals in your brain may be off balance or imbalanced.
Thank you. This next question is for Nancy Loeffler. How can I just sit at home all day and still feel tired? Why am I constantly exhausted?
That's a great question. One of the things that isn't often talked about in grief are the physical manifestations of it, and grief and the feelings that come with them. And just let me say something about the feelings of grief. We say we're grieving, but what does that mean? And I discovered that grief is like a combination of a lot of different feelings, and they come at us in different intensities at different times of the day. That's why they can seem so overwhelming. And so being with feelings of grief can be almost like having a low level fever, and we're constantly in this state of stress. And we all know what stress does to our bodies. And so it's about learning how to be with our uncomfortable feelings. And we don't like to do that. So how do we do that? By meditation, mindfulness, self-care, all the things that we've been talking about. And as Michelle said, that helps us to create a greater capacity to be able to be with the feelings as we continue to take care of ourselves and learn how to be uncomfortable, learn how to be more comfortable with the uncomfortable feelings. None of us likes to do it, and that's the only way through is by being with them.
Right, right. Thank you. Our fourth topic is beyond COVID. How do we transition? And my first question I'm going to ask to both Michelle and Nancy Ruffner. First of all, Michelle, how can I bring structure back into my life with so much uncertainty?
Yeah, so you can do that by adding a little by little. So let me say that. Don't put too much on your plate too soon. Like add one thing, accomplish that, and then add something else. Again, in therapy process, like when I process things with my clients, I always add one skill, see how they do with that skill. And then we talk about and process the skill, they do some reflective work, and then we add something else to their plate. So they know exactly what they're able to do. They understand how effective the tool is that they've been using, and they understand how it fits into their new normal. So again, it's important to be aware. If you're not aware of exactly what you're doing, how you're proceeding, that just creates more anxiety. So you want to be aware, identify where you are in your change process, what skills worked effectively for you, implement some of those skills, and last but not least, again, be kind to yourself. So if you're not able to utilize something as effectively as you would like, it's okay. You're going to make mistakes. It's a part of the change process. It's a part of growth.
Right, thank you. And I'm going to give that same question to Nancy Ruffner. How can I bring structure back into my life with so much uncertainty?
Well, as has been mentioned a lot, we have trends here today. Self-care. I focus on routine. I focus on meeting my commitments. I'm still going to go to the doctor. I'm still going to pay my bills on time. I'm still going to prepare a meal. I'm doing what I have to do, and maybe I'll challenge myself just a smidge more. You know, sometimes doing the dishes after supper is the right thing to do, but maybe I can also take out the trash, or maybe I can decide to sort of stack a mail. And there's honor in doing that, in completing a task. It's something that I call a win or a W. I like to have successes, and calling them W's. Even if I have to manufacture some successes, has anybody here ever maintained a to-do list and then wrote something on your to-do list that you did so that you can mark it off? Okay. But there's honor, there's order, there's routine. It's a W, it's a win. Let's do it. I also go for routine and things that bring me satisfaction, and not the rut kind of routine. It's simple and easy things. For example, I make my bed every day because I can control that. It's other simple things. I might procrastinate doing those dishes, but if I get them done, I get them done on my terms. And don't they look good when I come into the kitchen the next time? And that's a win too.
Right. I like that. I wanted to add a little bit to that because you made me think, Nancy, you made me think about gratitude work. So it's all kinds of apps or papers or, guides you can use for gratitude journaling. So make sure you frame your day, identify what you're thankful for, what goal you want to accomplish, and do some reflective work. So that helps increase your motivation as well.
Thank you. So we've sort of touched on some of these questions overlap a little bit, which is fine. Okay. Nancy Ruffner, I was going to ask you this one. Everything is so uncertain. How do I plan? How can I plan?
For me, I don't plan out too far because things are going to change, as we know. I do enough to cover my bases and to give myself a break. If things get too overwhelming for me, I literally place that concern or that worry in the corner for the night. I will, in my mind, or pick it up and put it in a corner where I can see it. It will sit right there in that corner until I decide to address it. And things are going to look different in the morning. So I'll put it away for the night or for the day, and things will look different. I realize that, I reflect a lot on how resilient we've all become. We've done a lot, all of us, since March. We're adjusting, and we're going to keep on adjusting. And as has been mentioned, talking about it helps. Every time we talk about fear, it loses some of its power, and we might gain a neat idea that helps ourselves or someone else, something that we can try today, like has been mentioned in this meeting.
Great, thank you. My next question, I'm going to ask Michelle first, and the question is, I am uncomfortable with change, and everything is changing and different. How do I learn to adjust?
Right, so change is a process, so you have to assess your level of motivation. So anytime you're going through a change, you need to know what your core values are, how do they motivate your day-to-day, and how can you feed those core values? So if I know my core values are going to church or being around my friends, I need to figure out a routine to make that happen so I can have the capacity. So as things change, I'm motivated to do more, and I can kind of slowly work my way back into being into my new normal, we're going to call it, I guess, with COVID-19.
Right, thank you. And Nancy Loeffler, do you have anything to add to that question? Do you want me to repeat it? I'm talking about uncomfortable with change and how do I adjust to change?
Yeah, and I think it's okay to be comfortable with not knowing what your new normal is going to look like. Try out different things as you control the things that you can control. If something doesn't fit, try something else. Learning how to be with our uncomfortable feelings, we can do that by expressing them in movement or art, or finding, we may not feel like we're super creative. However, we can do everything we do in a little more creative way. So for me, it's always about putting us back in touch with who we are and helping the essence of who we are explain and help us to move through that those uncertain times, and certainly connecting with people, those connections.
Thank you. And this question is for all three, and I will start with Michelle because she's sort of touched on it, and this is great, and this is a great question. How can I focus on finding gratitude and making the most of what is positive?
All right, so it's a couple of ways. You can start with gratitude journaling. I mentioned that earlier. You can use a gratitude app. Literally, they have gratitude journaling guides, and it gives you examples of things you can be thankful for. Gratitude can also work when you're trying to implement self-care. So you can have a self-care skill in which you want to implement that day, set that goal that day, and then meet that self-care goal, and then reflect on that skill at night. So you're constantly boosting your motivation. Also, journaling in general, like without the gratitude structure, journaling should also be positive. As a matter of fact, most of your journal entries should be positive. It shouldn't just be a spew of emotions about what didn't go well in life, because that's what you'll focus on. So if you focus on the positive things that you were able to accomplish and you're continuing to be kind to yourself, you constantly build motivation.
Oh, interesting. Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask the other two, Nancy Ruffner, I'm going to ask you the same question. How can I focus on finding gratitude and making the most of what is positive?
Well, I'm a big fan of gratitude lists, both the written kind and the verbalized kind. Some people will manifest gratitude through yoga or meditation. I say things out loud all day long. Today, I grabbed my favorite coffee cup, and it was my favorite, and I knew it, and I just said thank you to nobody, right out loud, because I meant it. I'm grateful for that. To share a little bit of my personal routine is every morning when my eyes pop open, I say thank you for the roof over my head, because it could be so different. And I sit with that for a minute. And then at night when my head hits the pillow, it's good thoughts. What good happened today? Who did I see today or speak with today? What did I get done today? And I'm okay right now kind of thoughts. And I fall asleep easily.
Thank you. And Nancy Loeffler, how can I focus on gratitude and making the most of what is positive?
Well, I find that even when things are darkest, we always have something to be grateful for. We can start right where we are. We can be grateful for, when my daughter died, I didn't know what to be grateful for, but I was grateful for clean water or good food to eat. So we can always be grateful for what we have right now. And when we do the gratitude journal, as Michelle was talking about, when we go back and look at it, we see that there are so many blessings in our lives, and there is always something to be grateful for. So gratitude for me is a real game changer.
All right. And I wanted to add one thing really quickly, Sheila, to what both Nancy's have mentioned. So you want to make sure you're engaging your senses. So whatever you see, whatever you believe, whatever you hear, that's what you believe. Like literally you internalize it. So if you write these things down, these positive affirmations, if you have up some Post-it notes, if you engage in some positive conversations, you're reinforcing gratitude. And then you believe it, your motivation starts to increase. As a matter of fact, every client that I work with, we start with a gratitude journal. Literally, anybody I've ever worked with, that's what we start with, is gratitude work, because that's your foundation. That is your mindset, that's your framework, and that's essential when you're trying to function in a healthy manner.
Well, I'm gratitude feeling wonderful sense of gratitude for all that I have learned today. I've been taking notes, and you've just given us so much information. Do you have anything else that you want to say before we go on to the questions, any of the three of you? And this has been just wonderful, and we do, I'm sure, have some questions. Okay, well, I'm going to give this over to Kim, and thank you so much. And Kim, let's see if we have any questions that we might give to our three panelists.
So Kim, I know, Kim, give me just 1 second, because we had a couple of people that came in after we had already started. So just to let everyone know, if you have a question, we're using the chat bubble icon in the top right-hand corner of your screen. If you click on that icon, at the bottom, it'll say send to. You want to select from the drop-down arrow, Kim Lehman Loperfido's name, and send the question directly to her. And then she's going to go through and read our questions for us. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Shanae. And thank you to Michelle, Nancy, and to Sheila for moderating the pre-submitted questions. So these questions have come in during the chat. And the first one is, and none of these have been directed to any specific presenter. So I think as you feel fit answering. how can we help our grandchildren cope?
I can start that. So literally you can help them by engaging in self-care. So kind of like when you're on an airplane, you have to take care of yourself first with that protective equipment. So if there were a crisis, you would have to like put that protective gear on first, and then you would take care of them next. So if they see you taking care of yourself, they're more likely to imitate what you're doing. You could also connect them to mental health providers. Don't feel as if you have to take on that burden. There are professionals in the community. There are support groups for all ages that you can connect them to. So just knowing your resources, being aware of where you are in your process, showing them, modeling this good behavior, good self-care, reaffirming like that it's okay, that everything's going to be okay, showing them what that looks like. And also, as we've mentioned before, making it okay to be in a difficult space with your feelings. It's not always fun. When you feel sad, when you feel irritated, that is not always fun, but you want to normalize it. Because what you don't want is for them to hide those feelings and then they manifest themselves in a different way later, or in a negative way later.
And I think adding on to that is allowing them the space to have those feelings, and telling them that those feelings are normal, because if they grow up knowing that, they'll hopefully have an easier time than some of us did. And they will know that they can come to us when they are feeling sad or something like that.
Right.
That would be my response too. It's a time to talk. It is a time to be noticing their feelings, but also it's a good time to begin that conversation. They are looking to us, so it's a good time to be a good role model, but it's also a good time to talk about maybe how they got through some things in their life. It's a teaching opportunity as well.
Right.
Thank you all so much. And so this question came in that's kind of on those lines. So it's about how to handle those in your life who don't want to acknowledge the hard parts of this.
I can't say enough about boundaries. So if they don't want to acknowledge the hard parts of dealing with COVID-19, and they sort of chosen not to do anything different and to suffer alone, then you can give them the information they need. So I'm not saying that you don't connect people to resources and you're not supportive when you're able to be there for them. But you can't bear somebody else's burden. Like, they have to have their own process. So if you have to put boundaries in place to protect yourself from any negative energy, do so. Boundaries that doesn't mean you have to be confrontational. You could put soft boundaries, is what we call it in clinical terms sometimes, with people. Being friendly, but letting them know your expectations. And if they can't do that, then you just have to create some emotional distance.
Yeah, learning how to take care of ourselves without needing to take everybody else along with us can be a difficult lesson, and we all have our own journeys. And for me, that's a part of the journey. I don't know what someone else's journey is, so I create my boundaries and allow everyone else to create their own, if they're so called. It's not always easy.
All right, thank you so much. So there was a question around planning, which probably provoked this question for one of our participants. Thinking about, while we're still a long ways away from the holidays, given the uncertainty, and it's obviously important rituals and connecting with family, any thoughts or on preparing for the holidays and kind of how people can plan for some of those things that are maybe a couple months from now?
It's very interesting. I was facilitating a group that had a faith panel, and we talked about some of the different traditions over the holidays and how they had to modify them. It was the week after Easter, Passover, and everybody was talking about how it is different. What do they do differently? How did they carry on? How did they maintain? And it was fascinating and educational, and showed us a thought process. How do we think outside of the box? How do we make this okay? Still honor, still celebrate. And so even though it seems like a long ways off, we've got some holidays behind us now. We can continue to think outside the box and come up with new ways. Again, talking.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, while you
asking ourselves what.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you, Nancy?
No.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, while you can have a plan in place, you really want to focus on the here and now, like the moment. So it's okay to have a tentative plan, but anxiety can kind of rob you of the moment because you're constantly worried about what's going to happen next. So you really want to focus on in the moment strategy, sensory engagement, meditation. You can have a plan. Of course, everybody has a plan, but I don't want you to get too focused on the plan and then something go like outside of the plan and then it create more anxiety.
Yeah. And what I was going to say is asking yourself what you need, because grief and losses can make holidays look different anyway. So we don't know what's going to happen when the holidays get here. So continue to ask yourself what you need and have the conversations with your family and friends and loved ones about what that is. And then let it evolve in the moment, as Michelle said.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very much appreciated. So our next question is about how to support those who have lost a loved one during this time, but we can't be with them.
Yeah, that's always a difficult question, and it's meeting them where they are, letting them know that you're there for them. Some people want to talk, some people don't. Letting someone know that you're there for them, whatever, even if it's just to hold space and not talk. If honoring everyone's own process. And some people want to move towards something, like some kind of a memorial or something like that. I don't mean the funeral service, but doing something special for them, whatever is meaningful to the person that has lost the loved one. It's all about honoring where they are and letting them know that wherever they are is okay, and that you'll be there for them whenever they need you to be there for them.
Right. I totally agree with everything Nancy has said. Also, you can recommend, it's a good read, and I actually brought it because I thought about grief. So it's this book, for those of you guys that are I don't know if you can see it, but it's Embraced by the Light. So if you have like any type of religious background, like any belief in a higher power, this is a great book to kind of get an idea of what the spirit self is and what that kind of looks like. It's not to impose any beliefs on anybody, but again, if you are a believer, this is a good book to kind of read, to give you a different perspective of what happens after people may pass away. It kind of gives you a glimpse of heaven. It's very positive.
What is the name again, Michelle, of the book?
It's Embraced by the Light.
Okay.
It's Betty J. Eady, and it's been on the New York Times bestsellers list. It was published in 1992, so it's been around for a while.
Okay. Thank you.
Nancy R., I didn't know if you had anything that you wanted to add to that as well.
Where my thoughts were going too, while we're talking references and resources, it was read in Nancy Loeffler's bio, but I'd like for her to tell a little bit about her book.
Please.
Thank you. My book is, do I have a copy of it here? That would have been nice, huh? I do. my book is The Alchemy of Grief, Your Journey to Wholeness. And it's my grief journey, but it also has some of my own strategies, things that, lessons that I learned, and what my editors said is my wisdom. So it includes my wisdom. It really was something that came through me. Every time I read it, I think, wow, who wrote that? And I just, I'm still so humbled to realize that I am the author of this book. So thank you, Nancy Ruffner, for allowing me to speak about it.
It's great.
So we have 2 more questions that have come in through the chat, and there's still time if anyone wants to submit any other questions. And so this one kind of feeds out of that kind of the grief that we've been talking about. And this one's specific to the grief of not being able to be with a loved one who might be in a facility like an assisted living or nursing home, and especially the person having dementia, where it might be even harder to connect due to the limitations of the technology.
Yeah, that's a really difficult one. And I know the technology that I've talked to people who are connecting via FaceTime and with someone with dementia, that's a really difficult way to do that, and sometimes impossible. It's that ambiguous grief again, it's ambiguous grief anyway, because the person has dementia, so you're grieving for something, and there's no way to see your way through it. So it's again learning how to be with the feelings that come up, and finding resources and skills to work through those feelings. And Michelle mentioned the stages of grief, and I think it's important to remember that those stages are not linear. So even though you go through it, you can come right back around again and say, what happened? So knowing that those stages are not linear, and being just knowing that, and when it comes around again, knowing, okay, here it is again, I'm gonna go through it again, and that's normal.
Yeah, like that. And the thing about your mental health is that a lot of times you can't change the situation. So people are kind of like situational, like they want to change the situation and that's supposed to make them feel better. They want to change people and that makes you feel better. But you can't always do that. Like you have to understand your process. You have to be with your feelings. That's the only way, because you can't change situations all the time, nor can you change people.
Exactly. You can't change the situation, but you can change how you react to it.
Right.
Well, thank you all so much for such thoughtful responses. Our last question is, how can we support racial justice and peaceful protests while also attempting to keep ourselves safe during COVID?
Well, I think a part of this is understanding your role and what you're able to do. So maybe you're not going to be the person that's on the front lines involved in a peaceful protest. Maybe you can be behind the scenes. Maybe you can support some organization that you know is funding a peaceful protest. Maybe you can do something else, but you don't necessarily have to be putting yourself at harm's risk, like in harm's way, if you don't have to. So understanding your needs, and it is, COVID-19 is a real threat. So if you are to attend or be a part of a protest, you're placing yourself at risk. And especially if you're in the high risk population, then you don't want to take that additional risk. Like you want to make sure you're safe first.
To that, I would add, there are a lot of people finding new ways to participate. You can become more legislatively active. Let your representatives know what your thoughts are, and let them know that you vote. But there are a lot of people that have sprung into some very good work to touch on isolation and loneliness in our nursing facilities. There are a lot of people that went to bat to working, well, first to get testing or to get PPE and how about visitation? Because there are people dying from loneliness and isolation in our skilled nursing facilities. And so a bunch of people sprung into action. That was their calling. So it's a chance to listen to ourselves and say, well, what do I want to do in this situation? What can I contribute? And follow what your heart's saying.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Doing what you can do now rather than what someone thinks you should do or what other people are doing. Comparing ourselves to other people is never helpful. So listening to our own heart and doing what we're called to do.
Right, and having conversations, and we've said that, I think that's been the theme today, but like just having conversations about racial injustice and what that looks like and how you can contribute. Like, again, that human connectivity is essential, like just discussions, just calling it out, like for what it is, understanding your own bias, starting with yourself even, some self-reflection is helpful.
Well, thank you so much, Nancy, Michelle, Sheila, Shanae, for all making this happen. I know that that was the last question that had come through on the chat. And so if anyone had anything that they had thought of in the last couple moments, otherwise, I know that Shanae has asked me to see if folks are willing to share your emails so that we can have a survey that you would complete, and a very brief survey at that after the program. But that way we can continue to create programs that meet your needs, and especially meet your needs during this time. And so if you want to put your email into the chat box for me, Kim Lehman Lopper Fido, I can collect all of those and share them with Shanae, or if you want to send them to Shanae, whichever feels more comfortable.
Thank you so much, Nancy and Michelle. This has been just spectacular, and I hope we do many more programs like this. I think there's a great need out there, and you're just champions to come and talk to us today, and we appreciate it so much.
Well, I greatly appreciate the invitation and the wonderful company, ladies. Thank you so much.
It's been my absolute pleasure.
Right.
Yes, mine too. I appreciate being here with everyone. Appreciate the invitation.
Thank you so much. Everyone have a safe evening.
Okay, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.